Welcome into another bonus episode of Stone Cold Stros. I'm Brandon Strange with Charlie Palolo and Josh Jordan. Follow them on X at Palolo and at Josh Jordan 975 and read their work on sportsmap.com. We're a week away from the start of the winter meetings and what that could mean for Houston. We're going to discuss Dodgers keep racking up points on their credit card, but it's time for MLB to have an intervention. Before we get started, click like on the video if you want to see more offseason content. Hit subscribe if you haven't already. Help our drive to 25,000 subscribers. Be sure to click the bell for notifications so you know as soon as new bonus content drops. And when you're on the go, we're on all your favorite podcast apps like Apple and Spotify. Gents, the big news from MLB last week was that the Dodgers re-signed Tommy Edman to a 5-year, $74 million deal with deferred money. That follows them signing Blake Snell to a 5-year, $182 million deal, which also contained deferred money. Ken Rosenthal said on the Foul Territory podcast that given the growing disparity between the haves and have-nots in the league, he thinks that ownership will push for a cap following the expiration of the current CBA at the end of the 2026 season. And depending on how dug in they are, he thinks that the questions that are going to be raised could lead to a really ugly situation, one that could lead to a work stoppage. Now, no one wants to see that, but to paraphrase the late Owen Hart, is enough? And is it time for a change, Charlie?
Well, we hear this every time labor negotiations approach in baseball. And the Players Association, for near 60 years now, the strongest Players Association, one of the strongest unions, period. The response has been constant. Over our dead bodies, will we agree to a salary cap? The NFL has one. The NBA has one. The NHL has one. That's hockey. Baseball players have been steadfast. The system has worked just fine for them. And the problem on the ownership side is the schism in their own ranks, right? The Richie Rich franchises, well, what's in it for us if there's a salary cap? And in conjunction with the salary cap, we'll hear again about the notion of a salary floor. That, hey, owners, if you're going to be reined in, Dodgers, Mets, Yankees of the world, on the maximum that you can pay, well, then the Pirates and the Marlins and the Rays and the A's, they need a substantially elevated floor over a minimum. If the players are willing to go to the wall and choke a golden goose, a sport where the revenues have never been higher, and this with national TV ratings that basically have never been lower, a pox on all their houses. There's going to be a lot of breathy stuff said over the next year and a half. It's a 2-year runway still, 2-season runway anyway, until the collective bargaining agreement expires.
Yeah, I'm not expecting a whole lot to change, but maybe something should. The Astros, they're not a team that doesn't spend. They were like top 5 last year, and they don't approach any of these numbers. Like the Ohtani deal, $700 million, 10 years. We were just talking before at the contracts the Astros are either offered or given out. The biggest ones, Correa, 5 years, 160. Altuve got 7 years, 163 and a half. That's not anywhere close to $700 million. So really the haves and the have-nots it feels like just a handful of teams compared to everybody else, because the Astros spend. Now you could say, well, maybe the Astros spread their money out more. They don't pay one player that much, but there really does feel like a kind of a line between the teams that are really in it and the other teams that are just trying to compete. And we already saw all the outrage when the Blake Snell signing happened. People are like, well, the season's over. The Dodgers are going to win it again. There's no point in watching, which is kind of silly because we know baseball, you don't see a lot of repeat champions very often. But there is that feeling, that sentiment out there that it's kind of the Dodgers and the Yankees and maybe the Phillies and mostly the Dodgers is where all the animosity is right now, because they are deferring all this money. They're signing the top players on the market, and they just won the World Series. So there is a perception there, but is that going to change anything with what players and agents and what MLB actually wants to do? Probably not.
The owner said we agreed to a soft de facto salary cap of sorts with the collective bargaining tax, but there will always be some outlier owners. We're going to go back to the Steinbrenner Yankees in the late 70s when free agency first hit the scene. There have been times where the Red Sox have gone to seemingly crazy levels. also won 4 World Series over basically a decade and a half. And now it's the Dodgers on the West Coast and Steve Cohen with the Mets on the East Coast. I mean, the Dodgers, they're basically operating like a hedge fund, rubbing everyone else's noses in it. And, well, that Guggenheim thing is a hedge fund. So they're backed by billions, and the revenues of that market. I mean, the Snell contract made me blink 182. Now, I blink a lot, decades of tennis and sun-drenched eyes, but blink 182. You guys with me on this?
Yes.
That was nutso in a vacuum of contracts within Major League Baseball. With the Dodgers as just a cash register pumping out money, yeah, sure, 36 million plus for a guy who has twice in his career reached 130 innings. But the Dodgers are thinking, we're so good, we make the playoffs because, well, we always make the playoffs. So 130 innings is fine as long as we pace him and Glasnow for his $25 million and everyone else that they have, Yamamoto for his $325 million contract. As long as we have 3 or 4 of them healthy for the playoffs. And in 2024, they didn't have 3 or 4 of them healthy for the playoffs and still rolled through and won the World Series basically with 2.5 starters. So there are always going to be the exception franchises that can spend above all others. Do those franchises have enough in their coalition to block the smaller and maybe mid-market owners? Would Jim Crane immediately say, yes, salary cap? Well, within his division, that would help the A's. That would help the Mariners. The Angels just don't know what they're doing. That's a rich team and market. And the Rangers are very comparable. But the Astros are much more of a have franchise than not. They've been minting money themselves now the last couple of years, but they're just not at the Dodger Met level as franchises, the Yankee level, with potential franchise revenue generation over a longer period of time, and then specifically as owners, right? Crane is stinking rich. Dodgers and Mets are filthy, stinking rich, and then some. And you can never overcome that as an industry unless there is a salary cap. But the players have always said no.
Well, you know who really liked that Blake Snell contract was Framber Valdez. He liked the sound of that. 5 years, $182 million. Snell's 32 years old. Framber's 31 years old. They're both kind of in the Cy Young conversation seemingly almost every season. So that tells me that Framber, you're not sticking around. That 182, 5 years, that's more than the Astros have offered anybody. I mean, period. So, and that's just Snell, like one of their pitching pieces to the Dodgers. That's just kind of like pocket money to them, the Snell contract. For the Astros, that would be the biggest deal they've ever offered any player. And it's not even all that close, to tell you the truth. So this tells me Bregman, Framber, I don't like their chances based off these numbers. Seemingly Jim Crane hasn't really considered inflation and moved up the amount of money he's offered guys. I mean, it's respectable around $30 million a year, but all his contract offers are 5-6 years. Correa at 5 years, 160. They're offering Bregman less than that at 6 years, 156. And what was the Correa deal 3 or 4 years ago? It's like Crane is in like this place in time that just stands still with the contracts they offer up while inflation is kicking in and the Dodgers are handing out $700 million contracts.
Again, the Dodgers are so unique. I mean, every free agent has to be thinking, boy, if just the Dodgers or the Mets want me, right? Corbin Burns is the more direct template, a workhorse guy over a period of years, free agent this cycle, a year ahead of Framber Valdez, basically the same age. So if Daddy Warbucks with the Mets doesn't win Soto, or maybe even he does win Soto, and he gives Burns 6 years, $210 million. Okay, then what does Max Fried get? What's the top of the line salaries that non-Dodgers or Mets, or other than Soto, if he stays with the Yankees, what is out there? The Dodgers gave Tommy Edman, a very valuable utility guy. He can play a good shortstop. He can play a good center field. But they gave him 5 years, $74 million. I'd love to know who was anywhere close to that ballpark for a guy who's almost 30, who just missed more than half of the season injured. He had a terrific postseason, but that was money that said to me, only the Dodgers. They have their own financial playbook, rule book, the Dodgers and Mets. And does Jim Crane adjust to the times, or does he stay dug in what he would say is discipline that has served the Astros well? though they've now tapered down 2 years in a row. And when you don't have a farm system, right, the Dodgers still produce premium talent. The Mets farm system right now, much better place than the Astros farm system. But I will note, for the Jim Crane school of thought, 2024, there were 10 players in Major League Baseball under contracts with an average annual value of $35 million or more. 6 of the 10, Max Scherzer, Justin Verlander, Jacob deGrom, Mike Trout, Steven Strasburg, Anthony Rendon. Talk about little return on investment, especially with old pitchers.
Rosenthal made the point that having the big villains in the league is good for rooting interests and storylines because it gives you the big bad to root against. I would think what's interesting from a Houston perspective is a hard cap means the teams have to be more shrewd with their money and with their drafting, because if you're letting guys go, you can have that hard line in the sand if you can backfill those positions with good young talent. And it's also punitive. A hard cap is punitive when you unload draft picks like Houston has over the last 8 seasons as they've continued to shove and shove and shove. The Astros have always been shrewd with their money, as we've just talked about, but they haven't necessarily been smart with their money over the past several seasons. And that sees them going into the 2025 season with some dead money on the books. That would hurt a lot more with a hard cap in place. Should the Astros fans be concerned that a cap would actually or could actually hurt Houston in the long run with some of these bad moves?
Well, look, if there were a hard cap for 2025, and let's just pick a relatively round number, $250 million, $250 million, with the Astros having $60 million wasting away, Montero and Abreu and McCullers and at least a chunk of Javier's money, that would be a real problem. I just think the incentivization that would have to be there for the players to agree to a hard cap. I mean, the owner is going to be willing to let guys become free agents after 3 years or 4 years as opposed to 6 years. So I guess there's 2 years of angst coming with this. But in the bigger picture, Dodgers, Mets, Yankees aside, the Astros are much more in the Red Sox and Cubs financial boat than they are with the have-nots. So I don't think a hard salary cap is specifically helpful or would be to the Astros.
Speaking of the Snell news, we touched on it. It's been sort of a winter of vindication for Scott Boras. 5 of his clients who happen to be starting pitchers have signed so far. You saw Snell, Kikuchi to the Angels, Montas with the Mets, Boyd with the Cubs, Martinez with the Reds. Obviously, Houston's watching intently for Boras's client in Alex Bregman and where he'll go. We talked about how Boras's failings the previous offseason could impact maybe his negotiating strategies this season. But I mean, seeing how he's had success, it's hard to see them, not holding fast now. Josh, you brought up the report last week that the Astros were willing to go to 6 years, 156 for Bregman. Boras and Bregman are looking for $200 million. Obviously, pitching is a different market altogether. But do you think this bounce back we've seen from Boras this offseason and all the money and years being thrown around, do you think that emboldens Boras and Bregman to hold fast for that big payday?
Yeah. I mean, they're clearly not getting what they're looking for from the Astros. Like I said with Jim Crane, this is like the land where time stood still. These contracts don't change. 4 or 5 years in between these offers. They're always around 150 mil, 5, 6, 7 years. Even Altuve, future Hall of Famer, the most important player in franchise history, 7 years, 163 and a half. I know he's a little older, but yeah, if I'm Bregman and I'm Boras, you don't hire Scott Boras just to get a deal. You want him to go get you that big one. So I think they're going to be patient here. I think Bregman's going to get what he wants. I think $200 million's fairly reasonable in this market, but it's all about what is somebody going to pay. And we know Bregman's one of the top 3-4 best players on the market in this free agency. So $200 million, I don't think it's way off. And it just based by what the Astros do, hardly any of these guys accept these deals. Correa didn't take 5 years at 160. That's a much better deal than Bregman's getting offered at 6 years, 156. And that was 3 years ago. So I'm just saying, I think the Astros do what they always do. We're going to make a competitive offer, and they tell you that. And Dana Brown's going to be in contact with Scott Boras, and they're going to give you the old college try, but they're just going to come up short. And they do this pretty much every time. So, unfortunately, I'd love to see Bregman stick around, but I think they're gonna get a number more than what the Astros are offering, and I think it'll probably be from a team that is at least decent. I don't think Bregman's gonna want to go somewhere and lose 100 games every year, but I don't think that's going to be the case. I think somebody is going to come with a better offer than the Astros, and on a team that Bregman's okay with, and I think unfortunately they part ways.
If he's going to get $200 million ultimately, unless you're insane, or the Dodgers or the Mets. Again, if you have money, you're eccentric. If you don't have enough money, you're insane. 7 years. It'd have to be 7 years. And a 7-year contract for Alex Bregman is silly. He's 31 years old, basically opening day next season, off his worst season, hasn't been an all-star or an elite player for 5 years. But all it takes is one desperate suitor, who's the sucker at the table or who hasn't landed another free agent. And, well, we have to do something, and we'll make a tactical overpay because, well, Bregman is baseline is he's a very good player, and maybe he can get back to 2018, 2019. I doubt it, but maybe he can. Leadership, intangibles, championship pedigree. You can sell yourself on a lot of things. But is there that one team? That the Red Sox don't get Soto and they get one starting pitcher, but they want one more bat. The Phillies, something we raised several weeks back. They could trade Alec Bohm and open up third base for Bregman. Or Bregman could move to second base with a certain team if they're willing to make it worth his while. And maybe Bregman is the one guy because Willie Adames is younger. Anthony Sandaire is coming off a much more slugging type year. That maybe with Bregman, with his blessing, should be with his blessing. He's the client, not Boras. That you do wait it out a little bit because as you talked about, Brandon, boy, a lot of these Boras guys are doing very well. Boras clearly shifted the game plan. And it's not going to be, well, I'm going to wait it out, and eventually one of you must cave for each of my guys. And it just didn't happen last offseason. And he's locking and loading earlier on, but it won't be that way with all his clients. And maybe Bregman is the one that it takes longer than any of us would like it to take. And how long will the Astros wait? Or do they, in the "we'll never acknowledge this publicly" column, say, yeah, we know we're not getting him at the end. So how long do we have to wait to make it look like we're in the bidding till the very last moment and then still have something to which they can pivot in free agency or trade?
As we teased in the open, the winter meetings are a week from opening and a lot of names up in the air. Orioles are expected to lose both Corbin Burns and Anthony Santander in free agency. ESPN's David Schoenfeld projects Santander could sign a 3-year, $69 million deal with Houston in free agency. Considering the years and dollars being thrown around, that seems kind of a deal. Eric Cole from Fansided believes the Astros should take a hard run at former Cy Young winner Shane Bieber, who's coming back from Tommy John. Bieber would be joining a rotation that already has two guys coming back from TJ and Garcia and Javier. McCullers is trying to return from that flexor tendon surgery as well. When we were kids, you used to go through packs of baseball cards with your friends and you divide them into piles of need it and got it. And the category of recovering arms, it sure seems like the Astros got it. Thoughts on either one of those guys, Santander or Bieber, as free agent targets for Houston?
All right, after Blink 182, I'm doubling down. I'm not a believer. Not at this phase of his career. You just mentioned it. I mean, how many recovering arms do you want? And do you want to pay a guy to not pitch for at least a half a season? His name's Christian Javier for 2025. And Bieber, now maybe he got his 100,000-mile checkup and fix, but he'd been tailing off the last year and a half with his stuff and his results. I mean, if healthy and back where he was, hey, he's outstanding. I just don't think the Astros are the team to take a flyer on him because this isn't Penn Murphy where you can claim him off waivers for nothing, basically. Someone is going to give Bieber 10, 12, $14 million and cross their fingers that he gets it rolling at some point 2025. I can't see the Astros being that team.
No, you guys already laid it out, the guys that already had it, but also guys like McCullers that just have had arm issues and have just never been able to bounce back. And to go in and try and outbid somebody for a guy that you hope can help you this year, and then you wouldn't want to do that. You'd want it to be a multi-year deal because you would want that return on investment next year and the year after if you're going to kind of let half of this year pass and just kind of hope he recovers. So then that means you have to commit even longer to an injury prone guy, or at least a guy recovering from an injury. That doesn't feel like the Astros style. Santander makes all the sense in the world, man. We could use another guy on the team that slugs over 500. Right now, I think you really just have Jordan and Tucker, the only guys doing that. A guy with an OPS over 800. We saw Altuve kind of fall off this past year. And if Bregman walks, it could make a lot of sense. And we heard them already saying that Jake Myers may be kind of on the way out, and maybe Chaz could be the guy in center field. And it sounds like Jordan's going to move in the DH spot. And who knows what happens with Kyle Tucker after next year. Based on all these numbers we're talking about, there's got to be no way Tucker's coming back if he's wanting that $300 million. So Santander would make a ton of sense if they could get him at a reasonable number because, like I said, Myers, McCormick, who knows, Tucker could be on the way out. Do they want to play Jordan in the outfield? They could use a steady hitter that could really take advantage of the Crawford boxes that can play in the outfield. So and he plays a little bit of first base too, not a ton, but he's done it in the past. I think that would be a great signing if they can get it done. And the number seems way too reasonable. We'll see if that's actually what he ends up getting.
If it only takes 3 years, and again, this is predicated upon Bregman's a goner. Because if you're bringing back Bregman, he's $25 million. If Santander is $23 million, the Astros are approaching the third tax threshold, unless they're trading Fromber and or Tucker and can find a taker, which Ryan Presley says, okay, I'll go there to move some money. But Santander is a switch hitter. He's not a very good outfielder, but the small left field in Minute Maid Park, you can hide almost anybody there. You've been a very good offensive player for 3 years running now. Well-timed career year in 2024 with the 44 home runs. 7 starts at first base. That's it over the last couple of years. But that doesn't particularly frighten me with an eye to maybe Yainer Diaz becoming the longer-term first baseman at some point over the next couple of years anyway. And in this marketplace, 3 years, $69 million for what has been Santander's production. I'd take that over 7 years, $200 million of Bregman.
I would too. And just quickly on Jordan, this year he's going to play for a little under $16 million. But when we go into 2026, that number jumps up to $26 million a year for the next 3 years. So you're going to be paying a little bit more for Jordan after this season.
But the AAV that counts toward the luxury tax number is $19 million each year. So that Crane organizationally, the cash on the barrelhead that they're paying out, that's on them. Fans shouldn't be concerned about that. Fans should entertain no complaints about, look at all this money that we're paying out. Right? Alex Bregman made almost $30 million in 2024 cash on the barrelhead, but over the 5 years of his extension, it counted $20 million per year on the books. Altuve's extension, heavily backloaded. If they sell the franchise at some point, let the new owners take care of 38 and 39-year-old Altuve, but he's $25 million each of the next 5 seasons in the AAV.
Well, as we said, we're just a week away from the start of the winter meetings, and maybe that's when some dominoes will start following. Well, obviously, one of the biggest dominoes we're waiting for is Juan Soto. We have reports that word could come down within the next 7 to 10 days. So when that domino falls, I think that will be when some other big ones fall, including Bregman, and we'll see how that all plays out. And we'll have that covered for you right here on this channel. So make sure that you are subscribed. That's going to be it for this episode of Stone Cold Stros. If you're watching on places like YouTube, be sure to hit like on the video. That helps us. Subscribe to the channel so you know when new content drops. If you listen on places like Apple or Spotify, do us a solid and give us a 5-star rating. If you would, that would help us grow the audience so that other people who are Astros fans like yourself can find the channel. Charlie, Josh, and I will join you next week for continued off-season coverage, but you don't have to wait that long to get used to Sports Fix. All you have to do is subscribe to this channel and our other channel, Sports Map Texans on YouTube. We'll have more content for you during the week, including our reaction to some rumblings from insiders regarding the possibility of Texan coaching changes in the offseason. That video will drop for you on Thursday over on Sports Map Texans. Thanks for listening. Until next time, go Stros.